and welcome. I'm your host, Booqii. Welcome to the Sip and Grow with Booqii Podcast. And on this podcast, we talk about all things sobriety, inspiration, personal and professional growth. And we look at these topics through the lens of our guests, based on their personal experiences, their journeys in life. And today we're happy and excited to be hosting Sarah Drage. Sarah is an ambassador for NACOA, the National Association for Children of Alcoholics. Sarah is a mental health advocate. Sarah is a campaigner. Sarah is a speaker. She's a podcast host. She's many things. And she's been featured on platforms like TEDx, on the BBC, Telegraph. She's shared her stories in many platforms. And I'm excited that she's here today to share her story with us. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah. So Sarah, for the purpose of our audience and people who don't know you, can you tell us who Sarah Drage is?
Yes, of course. So hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. I should start off by saying that I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. I sadly lost my dad, Steve, to alcohol use disorder in 2017. And that kind of catapulted me into this realm of advocacy and campaigning. So I knew that when my dad died that I didn't want him to die in vain. And I knew that there's a huge stigma associated to being an alcoholic. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to make sure that we can have open, honest conversations, destigmatise alcohol use disorder so that people that are addicted, people that are affected by a loved one's drinking can feel empowered to get the support they need. So I embarked on this journey, which I'm not going to lie.
Since 2017.
Since 2017,
Wow.
It's been super tough. It's a stigmatized subject. Not many people are ready to hear about it. And I set up, to begin with, I set up a Facebook group to talk about our mental health, to have conversations with one another and just be really open about our experiences, try and break down stigmas. And at the time, I still weren't quite comfortable talking about my dad's addiction. So I kind of still kept it a little bit quiet until a friend of mine approached me and said, listen, TEDx are recruiting in our local town. I think you've got a really powerful idea because, TEDx is all about your ideas and what you can bring to the table to like innovative ideas. And she knew that I thought stigma killed my dad. I was very, very passionate about how, stigma caused him to be embarrassed. Stigma made him ashamed. He didn't want to ask for help because he felt that it was something he could control on his own. And, my dad was a very stiff upper lip Yorkshire man. He weren't going to ask for help. So I do believe the stigma massively contributed towards that. And she approached me and said, listen, I think you need to submit this idea, or I think you need to talk about it. And at first I thought, no, I can't. I can't do that, because at the time I didn't have that confidence in myself. I felt like I was a young mum. I was working in a job that weren't fulfilling me. I was, I didn't feel like TEDx was within my remit. So I applied.
Like most people do, like most of us do, actually.
So I was so unconfident. I just didn't think it was something I could do. And I didn't think that, because I'm not an academic in that area, I thought, well, who am I to get up on that stage and talk about this? But I did it a week before the deadline, and I submitted the application and I got a call back, and eventually I was invited to speak, and I was absolutely just over the moon and thrilled, and all kinds of emotions that come with that. But it was also the time that I announced to the world and to everyone else how my dad died.
Oh, dear.
And I knew it was something that I had to, if I was going to break down stigmas, I had to share my own story. I knew that, okay, if I'm going to do this, I have to practice what I preach, right? I have to talk about it. So I did the TED Talk, and that just catapulted me into this world of campaigning.
Wow.
And it was well received by some and not by others. Like I've got a very powerful stance on why I believe a part of why I believe my dad died. And then I set up an Instagram page. And at the time, again, I thought, well, I'm not addicted to alcohol, so who am I to talk about this? I can break down stigmas and I can share our family story, but who am I really to talk about this? Until I found NACOA. Like, so the National Association for Children of Alcoholics, didn't know they existed.
Neither did I until recently.
Honestly, like, and I look at that now and I think, if only I knew when I was growing up that I weren't alone. If only I knew that when I was growing up, my anxiety, the feeling that I always had to control my dad's drinking, that I was always responsible for it. If only I'd have known that I wasn't alone and that there were others out there like me, would have been just life-changing and so refreshing. So I realised at the point that, you know, there's a huge amount of people out there that are affected by a loved one's drinking. And a lot of them are children and a lot of them are partners and siblings. Yeah. But there is a significant effect and impact that it has on the child of an alcoholic. And I started researching, and then the passion and that fire kicked in within me, like it does. I'm neurodiverse. I have ADHD, so as soon as I fixate on something, I'm like, right, I am in this, and I need to change this. Yeah. So I started this campaigning on social media, and at the time you think you're not doing much of a big thing. You think, well, I'm only sharing my story, I'm only talking, and I was doing public speeches, and I was contributing to the press and giving interviews and sharing my story for articles, and it just grew. And again, I didn't feel like I had that. I'm not an academic. I'm just sharing my story. I'm storytelling. I'm sharing it in a way where I'm being brutally honest about how it affected us, the good and the bad. And it just took off. And then I got a phone call from the BBC.
Wow.
And I had been nominated for an award, for the Making a Difference award, and I won that category. Was not expecting it at all, like absolutely not expecting it. And it's just kind of snowballed after that. So now I've set up a blog, I have set up a podcast, the Children of Alcoholics podcast. And we talk about all angles. We talk about people that have been affected by alcohol addiction. So we get to have those questions and answers that I never got to ask my dad. And it's crucial. It's an absolutely, like, I've been really fortunate that I've been able to ask other people affected by alcohol addiction the questions I never got to ask my own dad. Things like, why weren't I enough? Why couldn't you have just stopped? Like, why did you carry on? Did you not love me that much? Did you love that more than me? And they're all questions that you have as a young adult and even as a child. And me, at that point, I'm approaching my 30s and I'm still thinking, well, did my dad not love me enough? So I've been really fortunate that I managed to have those conversations, which have really helped me heal and accept that my dad's drinking wasn't my fault. I wasn't alone, and there was absolutely nothing I could have done, because I carried so much guilt. So when I realised all of that, I thought, this has opened up so many doors for me to heal. It's given me some life, like my life back. I've got that control back. I've got that acceptance, and I want to be able to encourage others to have that. And you can only have that when you talk about it.
Yeah.
So, which is why now I do the podcast. I've set up a website where I submit blogs, and I invite people to share their experiences and just give other people that platform to share their voice. So
interesting.
That's it's
quite
very long-winded.
It's very packed. And I think I picked on a couple of things, and one of it was the fact that you said you weren't addicted to alcohol. Because one thing I find within a lot of the sobriety spaces, obviously I was on the Dry January group on Facebook, and you see people sharing, there is that element of, okay, it's almost like you have to be addicted or see that you have a problem before actually doing anything. So I find that's quite interesting, that you didn't wait to have that experience of, oh, you know what, I'm actually addicted now I need to do something. And then using your story and your experience and I guess your childhood to then turn things around positively. What would you say were sort of like, I guess, tools and things that helped you reconciling, sadly, the loss of your dad, and then using that as a momentum to change the narrative? Because a lot of times individuals were like almost like victims, or we act the victim of our circumstances, but then you've taken on something that clearly would have been quite difficult, emotional for you at the time, and then you've just turned it around. Like, what's the motivation? What's the driver? Like, what prompted you? It's like, okay, you know what, let's do this, and I can do this.
I remember it like as vividly as it was yesterday, that moment where I had that epiphany. and it was on my father's deathbed. It was as we were switching off his life support machine. And I remember standing there, because at the time I was so crippled with my own anxiety. My mental health was not great. And I knew that I could end up like that. This could be my children in 20 years' time, turning off my life support machine, because I'm very much my dad's daughter. And I realised at that moment, had we just spoken about all of this as a family and gotten the help and not been embarrassed or consumed by that stigma, then maybe things might have been different. So I remember being on his deathbed and I turning his machine off, and there was a crossroads. I remember it almost like imprinted in my mind. I saw this road and there's two turn-ins. I either go down that road where my dad went and become my dad's daughter and continue that family trauma, that generational trauma, I continue that, so my children are affected, or I turn it around. I get help. I have therapy. I take accountability for what I feel like at the time I did wrong, because there were things I didn't know. There were ways I handled situations that I weren't aware of. And I know a lot of people will say, well, it weren't your fault. And I know it wasn't my fault, but there were elements where I had to take accountability. You know, the awful things I said to my dad out of frustration. And I'm not saying I'm not condemning that if other people, because I know other people go down that route, but I said some horrendous things to my dad. And I had to take that accountability for that and go, okay, I didn't understand what he was going through. I thought it was as simple as just stopping. I didn't realise that he was physically dependent, and that dependency was consuming him, and that going cold turkey like he did killed him. You don't realise, because you think that it's a legal substance, it's available everywhere. You don't realise the dangers of it. So I had to take all kinds of accountability and grow so I could move forward and heal. And acceptance, accept that, you know, it wasn't my fault. All of us didn't really understand or didn't know what we were working with. We didn't understand that it was an illness. We didn't get that. And really kind of accept and process all of that and talk about it. You know, it's a really traumatic thing to go through, to watch a loved one be consumed by alcohol and not be able to do anything about it, to watch their personalities change, to be around somebody and stepping on eggshells all the time, to not know what mood you're walking into, to have family events ruined, relationships ruined. It's a very difficult thing to navigate your way through. My dad was never violent, but he was always aggressive in his tone. So you never knew whether he was getting angry dad and drunk dad or sober and like loving dad. So we had two different personalities. So I had to learn to disconnect. I had to learn to switch off worrying about him. So all kinds of emotions that I had to process before I could even start grieving. So when we switched off that life support machine and I knew that, right, I don't want to go down that route. I don't want to be like my dad. Love my dad dearly, but I want to be like my sober dad, who was an amazing man. He was inspirational. He was just incredible, but he didn't have the tools and the resources. And I thought, I can change that. I can learn about it, and I can talk, and I can get therapy, and I can get help, and just talk to anybody who will listen. So that's what I did. I was so open about the experiences, and I embraced the trauma. And I know it's a really difficult thing to do, to have to sit with all of that and remember it and, like, you know, retell it all the time. It's really hard. It's really hard. And I'm still learning, if I'm really honest. I think we all are. I'm still learning and navigating my way through it. But I had to really process a lot of what I'd been through before I could properly start to grieve. And then all of the emotions come with it. So when I lost him, there was emotions like heartbreak. I was heartbroken. It was, you know, I loved my dad. I looked up to him. I absolutely adored him. But then I was relieved. And then I'm guilty because I thought, I should have done something. You know, I saw him 3 days before he died and I didn't call the ambulance when I should have done, because I thought he'll be fine. And he told me not to, but he was dying of liver failure. So I didn't call the ambulance. Then I'm thinking, well, the police are going to come and get me. I didn't do anything. And then I'm guilty because I feel relieved, and I'm relieved because we don't have to deal with it anymore. And I'm relieved that my dad's no longer suffering. So then I'm angry at all of that, myself, my dad. I'm confused. I'm embarrassed because now I've got to tell everybody how he died, and not embarrassed for me, but embarrassed for him, because the faces you get when you tell somebody it was alcohol addiction, and then all of a sudden it's a like back off kind of like, oh, that's it became awkward. So I had to process all of those different emotions, deal with them before I could fully embrace the grief and then grieve for him.
Wow.
I can honestly say, hand on my heart, at the point I'm at now in my life, that I have I am perfectly at peace with it. Like, of course I'd give anything to have him back, but I feel at peace. I feel I've accepted what's happened, and I've accepted that there's other things I can do to make a difference and leave a legacy for him. But there was nothing I could have done.
Oh.
And I think it's accepting that and moving on from that opens up more doors and opportunities. I feel like I'm mid-30s now, and I feel like I've already experienced so much in my little life and it's made me resilient, and it's made me open-minded and determined to make a difference. So that's where it all started.
Oh, wow. Well done.
Thank you.
And I think, because the truth is, like, everyone has different and unique experiences, and someone who is removed from that situation, who hasn't been in that situation, might not understand what it is. So for a listener or, for our audience who haven't actually had that direct experience, what would be sort of the symptoms or things they would look out for in a loved one to then make them feel or know that, okay, maybe there's a problem here, maybe we need to seek help? What are like I guess, the signs that you, maybe from your experience, you would have noticed, and maybe, sometimes even ignored and say, oh, well, that's just fine. Just so that hopefully somebody else doesn't ignore that and potentially be able to use that to help their loved ones.
Do you know, it's such a difficult question to answer, because I remember my dad drinking for as long as I can remember. Like, as long as I can remember, my dad had a
so we all
my dad had a drink in his hand. I noticed that his personality would change, and I associated that with the drink when I was a teenager. But his behaviour I'd become so accustomed to. So I just used to think my dad was weird. I used to think my dad had quirky ways, and don't embarrass me, Dad. Like, if you're going to come to this school event, don't embarrass me. Don't do stupid voice or pull stupid faces. Or I would say to him, can you just behave normally? Like, can you not? Like, it depended what mood he was in, because if he was in a good mood, he was just really funny and just quite quirky. But if he was in a depressed, unhappy, resentful mood, I used to call them, then we'd know about it. His tone of voice would change. So he'd have a different tone to his voice. His face would be more flushed and red and bloated. His eyes would be glazed, and he would just have this look in him, this look of like a different person, and the smell. And it's a distinct smell that I never understood until he had died, that it was an alcoholic smell. Or smell of alcohol. It just become almost like this ingrained smell to him. It was things like hiding drinks bottles behind the bath. Do you know that you've got the panel on the bath? He used to hide them behind there, or hide them in the airing cupboard under blankets, or the bins would be full. Or at one point he buried a lot of his bottles in the back garden because he was too embarrassed to put them in the bin. So that was a sign. It was drinking early in the morning. It was filling his Evian water bottles with vodka and screaming and shouting at us when we went to take a drink. No, don't touch that. Don't touch that. It was all of those little signs, subtle little signs that you would miss. And he trained himself so well to behave normally, and I say that in inverted commas, like normally, around other people where they had no idea. They wouldn't have known. We did. I knew when I was late teens, early 20s. I knew, like, Dad's been drinking again, and I'd ring up my mum before I got home. Is he drunk? Is he sober? What is he? Because I'm going to make a decision right now whether I'm coming home or not. So it was that kind of environment. You became hyper vigilant as a child, hyper vigilant. What, even I was so hypervigilant towards the end of his life that I could pick up the phone from him and one word, he'd say hello. And I kid you not, I would know whether he was drunk or sober. I would just know. And then the arguments would start. Because I'd say to him, you've been drinking again. And he'd deny it. I said, yes, you have. I can hear it. You've been drinking. Don't lie to me. And it would like back and forth. And then in the end, he'd keep repeating himself. That was another thing. Always repeat himself. And I'm like, I know you've been drinking because now you're repeating yourself. So just don't lie to me. And then that would be it. It would escalate. I wouldn't speak to him for a bit. And then he'd sober up and pretend that nothing had happened. And then cycle would repeat all the time. Oh. So that's some very subtle signs.
Yeah, that's quite heavy, you know. And for your own, I guess, personal journey or experience, what's been your own relationship with alcohol, bearing in mind the environment, and then now you're an adult, or at least at that time, post your teen years, were you sort of like, if you went to a bar with friends, was it something that you felt like, you know what, I don't like this thing, or I choose to stay away from this thing? Or, you know, did you go cold turkey and say, because of this experience and these observations, I see what alcohol could do, I'm going to go cold turkey? Or did you just feel like, okay, how did you, I guess in plain terms, what was your relationship with alcohol? What was it before, and where are you now?
Oh, it's been an up and down journey. I'm not going to lie to you. So when my dad was drinking, and when I'd had children and when I'd started working and I'd come home, I really embraced that mummy wine culture. I'm not going to lie to you. So I would think, oh, it's been a long day, I deserve a glass of wine.
Yeah.
And I'd embrace that. And then if I would go out with friends, my husband used to describe me as a go hard or go home kind of girl, and get really frustrated with me because if I was going anywhere and I decided I was drinking, then I was drinking to get drunk, make a fool out of myself. And that was it. And then I noticed that I was drinking to relax. And then I suddenly thought, oh, this is risky territory, because now I'm not doing it to enjoy it. I'm doing it to relax. And then it made me think of my dad. So when my dad died, I had this resentment towards it. I hated it. I couldn't even have one drink without getting a headache or feeling sick. Like, it was that I wouldn't get any kind of euphoric effects from it. I'd go straight to a hangover on one glass of wine or one drink. And I think that was my body's way of subconsciously rejecting it. It's almost like I developed this like allergy to it, I suppose. I was so resentful towards it, the smell of it. I hated how it was forced on me on nights out. I hated that. So I developed this.
When you say forced, well, I get it. But
yeah, it was. Oh, come on, just have one. Don't be boring.
Yeah.
Like, don't just have one. Don't be boring. Are you pregnant? Like, all of those kind of questions. That's what I'd get. And then I became more resentful because I think, don't force it on me. Like, I don't want to drink. Leave me alone. Yeah. And then it would carry on. And then I'd make a point of saying, well, actually, I don't drink because my dad died from it. And then the awkwardness in their face was just like, oh, I shouldn't have asked.
Yeah.
Now I would say I'm a very, very mindful drinker.
Okay.
I don't drink to get drunk. If I'm drinking, I'm out and about, and it might be because I'm at a dinner party and I might have a glass of wine. Yeah. And it will be a cut-off point where I'll think, no more, that's it. I won't drink at home for the sake of drinking anymore. Don't get me wrong, I've gone through stages of it.
Yeah.
But now I think I'm very mindful that I said earlier on, I'm my dad's daughter. I know I am. I have that tendency. I'm pretty sure my dad would have had ADHD. And when I got diagnosed with it, they said it's as hereditary as height. Oh. And there were so many different tendencies that I share with my dad that are traits of ADHD. So I know that I've got it in me. Not that ADHD causes you to be addicted, but it makes you more prone to it. Yeah, you're more prone to it. And this is what I was told. You're more prone because your mind is constantly racing. You're constantly on overdrive all the time. So actually substances like alcohol and other substances suppress that and just let you relax. So when I noticed that was happening, I was quite scared of it. And I knew that, well, I know it's easy. I know it's so easy to kind of just fall into that effect. And by the time you know it, you're physically dependent on it. So I'm very mindful, I'm very aware, and I don't, again, like I was saying earlier, I've done so much accepting of my situation where I did have this resentment within the first five years of my dad's death, so resentful towards it. Whereas now I'm like, actually, do you know what? Yes, it contributed to my dad's death, but my dad's death was from addiction. He was addicted to something, and addiction, in my opinion, runs far deeper than just the substance itself.
Yeah.
His addiction of choice, his substance of choice was alcohol, and that's how my dad was affected. But actually, it ran much deeper. My dad had unresolved trauma, depression, anxiety that he weren't dealing with, and his only way out in his mind was to consume alcohol. I think for me, I've had to be really self-aware of my own behaviours, and it's a real difficult skill to kind of own in on and be self-aware and accept that, I might have this, I might have that, and not be consumed by stigmas. I think so many people, in my experience and from the people I talk to, get so hung up on labels, where for me, I found labels for me have been empowering, because I've been able to label a reason, or give a reason why, give a reason why I might behave like this, or I might have tendencies to do this, and then find the right tools and resources to deal with them. So for instance, a lot of my issues, I would say, have been attributed to the trauma with my dad and having undiagnosed ADHD. When I discovered all of that and I became self-aware of the way I was behaving, and accepting that, well, actually, I do this, or I do that, or I have got a tendency to behave like that, and accepting it and embracing it, that has allowed me to really embrace therapy and different treatments. And I've had so many different kinds of treatments, like I started with CBT, and my trauma was too complex for CBT. And then I had EMDR therapy.
What is EMDR?
Eye movement desensitization. Oh God, it's a form of therapy where it's 90% effective for PTSD. You can get it on the NHS. It's really difficult to get it on the NHS, but they do it. So it's the therapist will trigger an emotional response by moving their fingers very rapidly in front of your eyes, and you watch, and it triggers emotions, it triggers flashbacks, and then you process all of it. And that really worked for the trauma I had with my dad. So because I had all of the childhood traumas, but then I had this trauma of finding him and switching off his machine and all of that, which is horrendous to have to witness. So that was one element of my trauma that we had to deal with before, because I was having nightmares and flashbacks and all kinds of issues from witnessing that. So then I had the EMDR, could process that, then move on to the next. Okay, I have to dig deeper. It was like a layer. It was I'd peel one layer off this onion, and then I'd be like, okay, there's another layer under there, and there's layers and layers and layers of just issues that I had to deal with. And there's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of investment, because this is
your personal investments.
Yeah, it's like
not on the NHS or anything.
No, I had to do it all myself, because you only get a certain amount of treatment on the NHS.
Yeah.
So at that point, you kind of just have to bite the bullet and go, right, I'm going to have to make some sacrifices and pay for some stuff, and it's an investment in myself. I cannot function normally. My family do not get the best of me all the time I'm behaving like this. Yeah. And that's what I mean about taking accountability. I had to take accountability for the fact that my mental health and my trauma was impacting my children. Wow. And that wasn't anybody else's fault but mine. I had to deal with that, and I had to process that, and I had to accept that and acknowledge it and get the help that I needed for it. So then I had a treatment called RTT therapy, which is rapid transformational therapy. It's a form of hypnotherapy, and again, peeled off another layer. That worked. Talking therapy, and then personal development coaching.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but it's a constant investment
in yourself, and I think that shows a huge amount of commitment from yourself. Because, I know that things necessarily aren't the cheapest treatments and things to have. And, for you to have gone and ensured that, you're not repeating history with your own children. I think that's really powerful. So would you say that, okay, for example, now at this moment in time, do you keep, for example, your personal development coaching? I know that obviously there are people that I had one of my cousins, she's actually been on the podcast. She's a mental health counselor or in America, and I know she talks about, sometimes, people can't stay on therapy literally as a routine, right? Not more like for preventative measures, right? So it's not like, okay, yeah, I've done this therapy, done, over. Sometimes you might need, so do you keep any sort of like, what's it called? I don't know what to call it. Kind of like an ongoing coaching to support you through your journey as a parent now, or do you feel like, you're in a good space and you're contributing, impacting, people with your story? And
I think it's a bit of both. So I'm very aware. I'm that aware now that I know when I might be getting triggered or I might be feeling a bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I know, okay, I need to talk to somebody. And where I've been doing this work, I've got a lot of connections in the industry now that I can pick up a phone and say, I need to book some sessions. So it's very much like that for me now. And the other thing that because I've invested so much time and energy and resources into discovering all of these traits about myself, I've actually had the tools that I need, and I've got the tools to process so when I know if I know that I'm being affected by something around my dad, for instance, I have all these tools that I can just reach for and use to my advantage. It's the same with ADHD. I know since having that diagnosis that, okay, I find it really difficult to keep focused on something that I don't necessarily find gives me a dopamine hit. So how do I get through that? So I've kind of accepted that's who I am, and I work with it, and I can find ways to work around it. So I think the self-awareness in this is key.
Goes a long way.
Massively, because when you're self-aware, you know when you're behaving out of character. You don't need to be picked up on it. You don't need to be told. You can feel it. It's coming. Okay, I'm on the brink of a burnout. Like I had it in December. I burnt out. But I knew it was coming, and I knew what I needed to do, and I took 2 months off work.
Oh, wow.
Which is difficult when you've got ADHD, because you get FOMO. You get the fear of missing out. You think, oh, if I take this much time off work, then I'm going to miss out on all of these opportunities. Yeah. But actually, I needed to do it, because had I not, then I would have just spiraled, and then the anxiety would have kicked in and the adrenaline that comes from that, and I would have been really ill. So it's knowing when to stop as well.
And I think it's a key thing. You mentioned self-awareness, and I think it's something that we can all take a cue from. I think moving on to NACOA, I obviously found NACOA on Instagram, as a matter of fact. So I was like, oh, what is this? What's this body? What do they do? And I think there was I don't know if it was on your page actually, where you were talking about how there's been cuts in funding. So what does NACOA do? For those who don't know what NACOA is, what do they do for children of, that have suffered or that have children of parents with alcohol addiction? What do they do for them? And what ways, do they support, people? And what's the impact of this funding cuts that they've experienced? How is that? What's the impact in sort of like real life?
So there's 1 in 5 children in the UK that we know of. And I always say that to people, that we know of, because not many people disclose that they're addicted to alcohol. Yeah. So we know that there's 1 in 5 children in the UK that are affected by their parents drinking. That's around 2.6 million kids in the UK. And NACOA, so the first, which I believe is their first vital resource, is to let children know that they're not alone, that they're there. So first of all, it's, this is a thing. You're affected as well. This is how you're affected. And it's the resources, it's the campaign work they do. And the second thing that they do, which is just absolutely life-saving for some children, is they run a 24-hour helpline. And children can ring the helpline if a silly thing, I say silly, it's not silly things. It's things like they might want to talk to you about, I passed my exams today. but my parents are drunk on the sofa with the curtains drawn, and I've got nobody else to tell. Some children ring in for a bedtime story to be read to them. Some children ring in to ask for help because they don't know what to do. They ask, or they want to articulate themselves and learn how to articulate themselves, but how do you articulate a condition that you don't have the language to articulate or verbalize to somebody? It's really difficult. Bear in mind as well, and remember that a lot of children are subjected to denial. So, and I was growing up, it's not that bad. I'm not an alcoholic. You're imagining things, or you're being dramatic. So there's that gaslighting that you get, and that constant, your reality is denied. So a lot of the time you develop this like anxiety around your own decision making, because you can't tell whether, you know, have I made all of that up? I mean, even 3 days before my dad died, I remember thinking, oh, he's not that bad, I'm being dramatic. And he died 3 days later. Oh. And at the time you think you're so used to being called dramatic and having your reality denied that you don't know what's real or what's not real, I suppose. You don't know whether, is this bad? Is it not bad? Am I being dramatic? And you so become accustomed to this way of living. So these children and adult children, it's really important to say that, because a lot of NACOA, you think, oh, it's just children. But actually it's adult children as well that get to pick up that phone and speak to somebody and have a conversation that isn't spoken about. It's deemed a secret. You know, it's the dirty family secret that you don't want to talk about. You're not allowed to talk about. You feel like you're being disloyal. You feel like, oh, I can't, if I talk about that, then I'm talking badly of my parent, and I can't do that. So it's having a safe, confidential conversation with somebody to articulate yourself, to get the help and the resources that you need, to be told that it's not your fault, to be told that there's nothing you can do about it, which is horrible to hear, because you want to control the situation. But the reality is that you can't do anything unless your loved one is willing to change. And that's a really tough thing to have to say to somebody, because it has to come from you, right? You know, I was talking earlier on about self-awareness. You have to have that self-awareness to know that, all right, I need to stop, or I need to make a change, or I need to get help. And a lot of people just aren't in that headspace. So NACOA do so much to raise awareness, to shed light on a situation that affects 2.6 million children that we know of, and their funding was cut. Now, the government will say, well, no, actually we invested like millions of pounds into local authority for addiction services. And there's a very distinct difference between addiction services and the children. Yeah. So what a lot of local authorities have done is they've ploughed all of the money into addiction services to help people. Like AA. People that are directly affected by addiction. And the children are sidelined. So there's nothing in particular to recognise them. So again, you grow up feeling unheard. You grow up doubting yourself, doubting your reality, doubting everything around you. And now we're in 2024 and the government aren't listening to the kids. Wow. Children affected by their parents drinking. So again, you're feeling unheard. So the cuts are significant because it sends a message to those children that you don't need the help
as much. Yeah. And I think it's also if we look at it from a long-term view, it's like you're preventing what would then be a problem in the future by dealing with the children now, right? Because if they get help that they need, if they become better humans by themselves, then they're very unlikely to follow the same path. And because I find that even with the NHS, I know this is not part of the scope of things. And I know that the NHS is doing a lot now to go more towards preventative treatments rather than treating the thing when it's happened. And we know, obviously, with things like diabetes and things, I know that there's all this like walks and things that you have to do if you're pre-diabetic. But I think back in the day, I don't think it was as much of a thing. So it's like, why wait for someone to get to the end point rather than doing things now, rather than supporting children of, or families that have been impacted by alcoholism and helping them. And of course, they would also be parents at some point, right? You're a parent now. And I imagine all the help, all the support that you've had along the way I imagine that's impacting your parents. And so tell us a bit about that in terms of, I know you got 2 girls?
2 girls,
yeah.
yeah.
I've got 2 boys. By the way, what are the ages of your kids?
11 and 9. Well, nearly 9. She's 9 in April.
Okay.
Yeah.
Timmy's 10 and Tito is 6. So yeah, kind of similar.
Quite close.
Yeah. So what's that like for you as a parent? You know, your experiences, and all the tools and learnings that you've taken. How is that impacting your parenting with the girls?
Oh, significantly, but for the better. Like if I remember back to when my dad was alive, and I said earlier on, I had crippling anxiety. My mental health was terrible. I was in denial about everything going on around me, stepping on eggshells around my dad, constantly worrying. And I wasn't present in my children's lives. And it breaks my heart looking back on that, because I can honestly say I was so consumed with anxiety that I probably can't remember at least 2 to 3 years of my eldest daughter's life, because I was just so consumed with it. So when you said about NACOA and the difference that they could have, if I would have known about NACOA when my dad was alive, I might have gotten that help sooner. I might have been more empowered and more knowledgeable and educated around that. Okay, I'm affected by this as well, and this is how. And when you speak to and hear other people talking about their experiences and you relate to it, you know, like I've spoken to other people in the community around the children of alcoholics, and we speak a language that only we understand. It's really, it's that, like, I can't explain to you. It's life-changing to hear other people go through it. So that's why it's really important that NACOA exists and we have those experiences. When my dad was drinking, my parenting, and I was so preoccupied with it, I was so consumed and crippled with anxiety, and I weren't getting the help. I weren't asking for it because, again, I was embarrassed. I didn't want that mental health label hanging over me, if I'm being brutally honest. And I know times have changed. But now I'm more self-aware, and I'm more invested in making sure that I get the support that I need, and I'm more focused on looking at, okay, why am I behaving like this? What is causing that? What do I need to do? Where can I reflect? It's made me who I am now, and I feel empowered, and I feel liberated, and I feel like I'm becoming successful. I am successful, and to own it and to embrace it and to feel good about that makes me a good role model for my children. You know, when they're saying to me, "Mummy, I'm so proud of what you're doing," that's like, that makes me, even now, that makes me emotional, because I think, okay, so I'm doing something right. Like, they're seeing it, and if they see me taking care of myself, if they see me working on myself, it makes me a better parent for them. Yes, do I work a lot? Yeah, absolutely. And some people might say, well, actually, you're missing out, and sometimes I feel like I do, but at the same time, they're seeing mummy be independent and make a difference and change something that she's passionate about and turning it into a career, and they see all of that. I'm a better person because of it, because I feel like I have that purpose. I feel good about myself. I feel liberated. So it's great for them. It's massively changed who I am. And it makes my advice skills a lot better, because now my daughter's she's preteen. She's turning 12 soon. And, she started secondary. So I can have all of these conversations with her about confidence and the importance of like knowing who you are, and the importance of being able to articulate yourself and all of this stuff, and have those conversations with her and pass on the stuff that I've learned. I think that's just incredible. And I always say to people, I don't think I'd be the woman I am now had my dad survived. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd give anything to have my dad back, but I dread to think where I would have been had I not had that moment where I was at that life support machine, and I don't know where I'd be, because there were points when I was so crippled with anxiety that I thought, I don't want to be around anymore. Now, I don't know what that means and what I would have done with that, but I'm very educated around mental health to know that that's a serious red flag, and how that escalates, who knows. So a part of me is grateful to my dad, and a part of me thinks, well, had he known that, he'd have been happy with that, right? So I think that it's massively impacted my parenting, but for the better, 100%.
Yeah, because I think ultimately as parents as well, we are, the first example that our children see, and I think that can be a very hard pill to swallow, to be honest, because let's say, well, mom of 2 boys and all of that, and the times that maybe I'm upset with my son or something like that, and maybe I'm raising my voice, I'm like, wait, okay, if I raise my voice at this child now, I'm teaching him that it's okay to raise his voice. So I know that sometimes I have to like caution myself when I do things. And even, and I'm sure most parents will agree, like the slightest habit that you have, most times one of your kids will pick it up.
Oh yeah.
So
I already see it. I'm like, especially my eldest, I'm like, oh, it's mini me.
Yeah. And sometimes my husband might say something like, oh, that's from you. I'm like, okay, yeah, I agree. Like there's some of them I can't deny, you know. But of course, if it's not something that would impact them negatively, then of course I don't mind. But when it's things that, for example, I'm particular about like how people speak to each other. I feel like even if you're upset about a situation, at least find the courage to explain yourself in the best way possible.
And be respectful about it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's hard because by the time you're upset about something, like all the rules and regulations in your head and mind is like out the window, and then you're trying to calm yourself down. So for me, I know the boys get tired of me saying, can you put your voice down, please? Because I can hear what you're saying. And maybe it's a bit of an African thing as well, right? I can hear what you're saying, but can you put your voice down? Like, you don't have to raise your voice to tell me that you want sweet, or can you have something? So that's and I think, again, the whole purpose of this podcast is also about personal growth. And a key point you've mentioned, self-awareness. And I try to be self-aware as much as I can, because trust me, there are times that you just fall off the wagon. And I think when you're falling off, recognizing that you're getting off and being able to get the right support, the right hopefully right people around you to then get you back on track, I think that's valuable, because realistically, saying that you won't err or go off the track or get distracted might not be realistic in real life, right? Because there'll be triggers. There might be things that will happen around you, but recognizing that you can pull yourself back, being able to pull yourself back, I think that's one key message I've taken from what you're saying, like just being self-aware. And I hope we can all take that message home.
You're never going to get it right though, are you, as well? Like it's never, there's times where I'm behaving in a certain way and my husband's great at bringing me back to earth, or like pulling me down and going, Sarah, like he'll say husband to wife, and that means that when he says that, or I say wife to husband, that's our code for like, we're going to talk to you about something really difficult right now, and you have to sit and listen to what we're saying. And he'll tell me and he'll talk to me. So I'm quite lucky in that way that I get to, I've got that support network around me, because we're not always going to get it right. There are going to be times where we're behaving out of character, or something's going on that we might not even know ourselves, but our loved ones will. So it's just taking on board, I think, what other people and yourself and how you're feeling. So, it's important.
Okay, so again, talking about self and self-awareness and all of that, what would you say your go-to routine is for like your self-care, self-wellness? What is that? What does that look like for you?
It's not ice baths, and not that I've got anything against ice baths, but it's not the gym or exercise. Again, like my idea of self-care for me, what works.
I can
really
tell
well,
one though, because you already said it. I can tell one, but I'll let you go.
Okay. I love watching Netflix, eating ice cream and chilling with nobody else around me. I love being able to just sit and chill. I love writing, blogging. Like that will be my self-care, because that I can articulate myself in words. So I always know some of my best writing comes when I'm not in a great headspace. So I always say to people, you'll hear less of me on social media when I'm in a great headspace, because I've got nothing to talk about. I've got nothing to say. or when you get a flurry of posts from me on my Instagram page, it's because I'm in a headspace.
Yeah.
And I'm connecting with an emotion and I'm writing about it, and writing's powerful for me. But my main and my other self-care obviously is picking up that phone to somebody and talking and getting hold of those professionals and going, okay, I need to book in a session and we need to talk. So I think it's recognizing it and knowing when to stop. But I do love sitting in front of the telly
and just chilling.
Yeah.
The one I was gonna say was like, I feel like you what I thought your self-care would be, or one of the things would be like speaking to people.
100%. Yeah,
because I could tell from, and I think that's something that's quite an interesting one.
I've definitely got a network of people around me where I will just pick up the phone. My sisters are great. If I'm ever feeling like, I will just pick up the phone and I'll talk about it. And my husband, of course, like, he's amazing. And then to other people on social media and having conversations, and like, it's just, yeah, I do. I'm not afraid to be vocal, and I'm not afraid to talk about things that are tough or that might put me in a compromising light. Like I've did it not recently. I did it a couple of years ago where I got approached by a journalist to talk about feeling relieved when my dad died, and that I did get some backlash for that. I'm not going to lie. It's not a nice thing to talk about,
I think it's sometimes with media, sometimes it's the wording, because if you said feeling relieved, it's like, oh, you're relieved, your dad's gone. And it's like, but then hearing the full story now, I can understand what it is. But if you just pick a headline, or if you pick a word and then, people take it out of context, I think, and that's why it's important. Sometimes when you see, like, even online, when people take a snapshot of a podcast, and then you have this short 30-second conversation, and then everyone's commenting on the post and they're bashing the person. I'm like, wait, have you listened to the full story?
Yeah. Right? That's clickbait though, isn't it? Like, that is clickbait, and it works. It gets you, it builds the views, and it's the purpose of it. So I don't begrudge them for that at all. But part of me I did feel relieved. But talking about it, what I've recognised since I've been an advocate or a campaigner within this area is that when one person shares something, other people will come forward. I can guarantee it. I can absolutely categorically guarantee that you'll talk about something, you'll be vulnerable, you'll open yourself up, but quite often you've got to be the first person to do it. So you've got to be really brave, and you've got to get up there, and you've got to talk about some real tough things, and then you'll get people come up to you. Oh, I really relate to that, or I've experienced that, or they'll message. So I make a point now of, I have a private little folder on my phone, which is all like password protected. Whenever anybody messages me to say thank you so much for that post, I've really related to it. Sometimes I can't always message everyone back because I always have to connect and put myself in that space, and it's really, really difficult. But I read them and I'll acknowledge them and I'll save them. So whenever I'm feeling like, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing, or I shouldn't be doing this, or I can't do it anymore, I'll scroll back through them and I'll have this like conversation with my dad and be like, look, this is what we're doing. This is the difference it's making. This is why we need to talk, because all of these people feel heard because one person has got up and shared a story. And people underestimate the power of that. And when I first started this journey, I had some real serious backlash from friends, old friends that are no longer, like, I don't talk to them anymore, but old friends that I just don't get what you're doing, and you're all about attention seeking and all about a brand and all of this. And I'd be thinking, oh, it's so deeper than that. Like, it goes beyond that. I don't want to be doing this all my life. I don't want to be taught, like, if I could have chosen some things to do when I was younger, I wouldn't have picked this. I wish I didn't have to do it. It wouldn't even
exist technically in your mind, I guess.
No, it wouldn't. It's not something that I want to be known, like, or would have strived to have been well known for. But it's something that's happened, and it's a responsibility that I take really seriously, because I know that it needs to be done. And I know that these conversations need to be had. And one day I will get to a point where I think, I've spoken enough about this now, so I'm going to pass the baton on to somebody else. Hopefully not anytime soon. I'll pass the baton to somebody else.
I'm sure there's still so much more we can squeeze out of you.
I hope so. Do you know what? Like, yeah, there is. And at the moment, I've still got so much more I want to do.
To give, yeah.
But it is my dream in the future to be able to teach other people how to campaign and advocate, because I think that there needs to be an army of people. Like, my voice isn't enough. We need more.
No, that would definitely be a good and key thing, because, you know, it's often said, like, it's better to show someone how to fish rather than giving them the fish, because they get better at fishing themselves, and they can also give other people fish and teach other people how to fish. So that's really powerful. And I know, obviously, in the course of your career and the advocacy work that you do, you've had lots of visibility platforms. And of course, it also comes with the bad, right? How have you been able to manage and deal with, like, criticism that you get, you know, the negativity around what you do? Like, how have you been able to manage that?
How have I managed?
Because you do a lot of good, but then there's always
there
like...
is. And you're absolutely right. I've had to really develop a thick skin. And again, a lot of work has gone into recognizing that when I get that kind of feedback or I get that kind of negativity, that's not their fault. Like, they don't understand what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to achieve, and they can't relate to that. So in a way, it's a good thing. They can't relate to what I'm talking about. Therefore, they don't understand all of this. But at the same time, yeah, it is a bad thing. An excuse for them. But it is tough. I'd be lying if I said that it hasn't taken me back or set me back at times. And I'll give you a perfect example. Last year, I had awful feedback in the space of a week from two different people. And it was stuff like, people are getting bored of this now. You need to just stop talking about it, and you let this define you as a person, and there's more to life and all of this stuff. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I just need to stop now. Maybe this is it. And then the BBC rang me to tell me that I'd been nominated for an award. And I thought, actually...
now we need to amplify.
Yeah, now I thought, actually, a few, I won't say the words on here, but I thought a few, like, chosen words back to them. And I thought, no, BBC don't think so. Yeah. And I thought, I'm going to crack on with this. I've still got more work to do. So you are going to get backlash. It happens. I get it all the time. I actually now have trained myself to think, if someone's going to go out of their way to say awful things to me on the internet, then that's a them problem and not a me problem. Like, I'm perfectly comfortable with myself. I'm perfectly confident that I know I'm doing the right thing. I'm speaking my truth, and that's the only thing that I can do. And I know that sounds really cliche, but it is. I'm not going to apologise for that. It helps a lot more people than it doesn't. So I just focus on that. But it's hard, and you do get sucked into it, because the internet can be a really horrible place at times. And you have your moment, and I vent, and but I'll never entertain it. It'll just be a case of, are you okay? Do you need some support? I can signpost you to somebody. But but I know it can affect other people. I know it's a big thing. Yeah. So, I mean, the worst one that I ever had didn't just affect me, it affected my sisters as well. Oh. And it was my TED Talk. The first comment on my TED Talk was, you and your family could not have loved your dad enough, otherwise you'd have tried harder. And I was absolutely devastated. Not for me. I was devastated because I thought, oh my God, what have I subjected my family to? Like, my sisters. And I'm very respectful of my sisters and my mum. Like, their experiences and their take and their view on it all would have been different to mine. Yeah. So out of respect, I won't talk about their experiences, because they're not my experiences to share. So I always talk about mine. And when I started doing this, I asked their permission, and I said, are you comfortable with me doing this? Do you support it? Because I didn't want to talk about anything or talk about my dad in a way that wasn't supported by my family. Yeah. So they were my main, like, if they were on board, then I'll do this. If they wouldn't have been on board with it and they would have been uncomfortable by it, then it might have been different. But when that comment come up on TEDx, I picked the phone up straight away to my sisters, and I said, I'm so sorry, but this is what has been written. I know this doesn't just implicate me. I know this is at you. And they were both like, we don't care. Like, we're so proud of you. We don't care. Like, it doesn't bother us. So as soon as that, I had that green light from my family and my sisters. They're the only ones throughout all of that I cared about, who thought about what I was doing. And if they were okay with it, then I don't care what internet trolls say. Like, it's on them. Like, they don't get it, and they might not be in the right headspace. to accept or acknowledge what I'm talking about. And that's okay as well, because I know what I talk about is triggering. I know it's hard to listen to and it's hard to acknowledge, especially if you're that person addicted to alcohol and you've got children. You don't want to listen to somebody like me talk about how it affected my life and how it affects children. That's horrible to listen to, especially if you're not at that place yet to accept that you need the support. You don't want to listen to it. And I get that. And I appreciate and respect it. So it's about, I cherry pick what I listen to. But I also listen to those people that have constructive feedback. So it might be somebody will say, actually, have you thought about maybe wording it like this because it sounds a little bit like, and I listen to that, and if I agree with it, I take it on board. If I don't agree with it, I'm confident in myself enough to know that I don't agree. So I would thank you for your advice, but I'm going to stick to what I know. But then it takes a long time to develop that level of just being thick-skinned. I think it affects my husband more than it affects me, because he'll listen to a comment, and it's vice versa. Like I get the same. If anybody says anything about what he does, I'll get really defensive and I'll be like, how dare they? And he's the same with me. He'll see it online, or he'll see somebody say something and he gets more protective, and I'll say, babe,
let it go.
So yeah, literally don't worry, it's fine. I'm not bothered. But
that's good to know. Tell us about your podcasts. How long have you been running now? And where can people find you on the podcast, and what do you guys do on the podcast? I know what it, but just for
so it's nearly a year old. If not, it might even be a year old. And I run it or co-host it with my friend Amy, also child of an alcoholic, and she's one of the trustees for NACOA. Her dad was also called Steve. Yeah, we did. Yeah, the first time we spoke, we were on the phone for 2 hours on my husband's birthday, because we bonded over trauma. And she has a dark sense of humour. She's absolutely brilliant. She's got this great dark sense of humour that sometimes you think, oh my God, I can't believe you've just said that on a podcast. But everyone loves her for it. And she just brings this level of just fun to this horrible, depressing subject, and takes it and owns it. She's great. She's a great trustee. She does a lot of public speaking, and we kind of just joined our skill sets. We both talk a lot about our dads. We both talk a lot about our experiences. So we thought, you know what, let's set up a podcast and let's interview other people that have been through this. We want to give a platform to people so they can share their experiences, and again, so we can keep chiseling away at that stigma and encouraging more people to know that you're not alone. You can't control it, you can't cure it, it's not your fault. And just reinstilling and reinforcing that message is just so key. We speak to all kinds of people. We speak to people that have been in addiction with alcohol, that have also been the child of an alcoholic, and you see quite a lot of that, because becomes learnt behaviour. And I know that some people believe that it might be hereditary, and then there's the learnt behaviour aspect of it. And then we speak to people that have been affected by their parents drinking, and they're doing things now to contribute, to advocate and campaign. And we speak to specialists. There's people that can shed a bit of light onto it all. We love it. We've been going a year, and you can find us on all the major streaming platforms like Apple, Spotify.
Are you guys on YouTube? Is it an audio only, or an audio and video?
No, we haven't. Not on YouTube.
Okay.
No. So we've got there's all the other. I've forgotten all the major ones. There's a list of icons that I see, but and I also host it on my website as well. So I have a blog for children of alcoholics, where again you can find lots of articles and lots of features from other people that have shared their stories. It's just, again, sharing that light. It's not a trendy subject to talk about, unfortunately. And I don't think it ever will be. So it's a real difficult thing to get out there. But there's demand for it.
Yeah, no, definitely there is.
Yeah.
What is one thing that people will be surprised to know about you?
I can sing.
You can sing?
Yeah. And I used to do musical theatre and performing arts, singing and acting.
Maybe that's where the confidence comes from.
Probably, makes sense now, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, because I was going to ask you, because it's not everyone who's had even the experience that you've had that can do what you're doing. I struggle with public speaking personally, right? And I feel like sometimes if it doesn't come natural, it's something maybe you can learn. I believe it's learnable. I believe every skill is learnable, right? But the fact that you've gone through this experience and then fast forward, like you're like speaking, TED Talk, BBC, and I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
So you've had it in you all this time.
Do you know what? Yeah. I grew up, like, I was always a natural performer. Loved it. Loved being on stage. Loved singing. Loved acting. And I attended musical theatre school. I went to a secondary school who specialised in performing arts and loved it. But I really wanted to do that as a career, like desperately, like that was my dream. But I lost myself growing up. And when I was 19, I thought, I can't carry on living in our family home. I need to move out. And being a performer and getting into that industry is really tough unless you've got a bit of backup and a bit of financial backup. And I felt like I had no choice but to go and get a job and to do something at uni. And I was so obsessed with trying to make my dad proud and stop him from drinking.
Uni related to performing?
No, criminology.
Oh wow.
Yeah, completely different. And this is what I mean. I've got like here, there, and everywhere. And maybe it's a bit of ADHD, but I think a lot of it, I was so confused with what I wanted to do. And then I was in a band with my husband, and our little claim to fame, our little 15 minutes was that we supported Peter Andre at a Christmas light switch on. Oh, wow. And then I fell pregnant at 22. And had my eldest daughter. So it all stopped. I stopped singing. I stopped acting. So everyone who says to me about the campaign and the advocacy work and all of this, and I always say to people, this isn't what I wanted to do. Actually, I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be a singer.
You can still be.
I could, yeah, but I think all my time at the moment is ploughed into advocating and campaigning. So it certainly helps. But yeah, not many people know that about me. It's one of those little secret.
That's quite an interesting revelation, but it makes sense now because it makes sense because sometimes once you have that little seed in you, at least then you can express it in very multiple different dimensions. So that's quite a strength Absolutely. That you have there. Is there any questions you have for me or anything you?
What was your experience like with alcohol? What inspired you to get into all of
this? To be honest, and I'm sure we spoke about this briefly earlier on. I have never drank. Like, I don't have a relationship with alcohol. So sometimes when I go into a lot of sobriety spaces, I feel a bit different because most times people you find in, the dry January group and all of the spaces and things are people who have had experience with alcohol who are either trying to cut down or move towards mindful drinking or we're going cold turkey. I don't have that experience, and that's the truth. But I found their stories, even though I'm not doing dry January, technically speaking, because it's not like I'm doing anything different from what I normally do.
It's always dry January. Always dry January.
Or sober October or whatever you want to call it. I just find, so I'm in these spaces, that person was like, reading the comments and like, maybe I'm an empath. Not maybe, I think I'm an empath. Yeah. And I just find the stories interesting and intriguing, right? And because I've never drank, growing up, I never had alcohol around me, so to say. I grew up in a very big family, but I always say, like, I don't remember having alcohol in the house as a thing, right? And my dad, even though he had, his other interests and things, alcohol wasn't one of them. Right. So it wasn't a thing for me. And then fast forward to when I moved to the UK, I then saw alcohol as, okay, so it's a norm. So, so when you go out after work, people drink. So it's a thing, Like it's, I'm not saying, obviously Nigeria, I'm from Nigeria, by the way. It's not like people don't drink, right? Yeah, people drink at parties and things. But this whole drinks after work, like a normal thing, and and I like to socialize. I like people. I think I like to be around people. So yes, I will go with my colleagues for drinks after work, but I'm like the odd one out who's like drinking Coke or orange juice or something like that. But I think the
sobriety shaming comes in then, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think the more I got into sobriety and just being interested in it, the more I started researching, okay, what are the drinks options out there? So now when I go to bars with colleagues or friends, I'm not asking for orange juice or, soda or anything. I'm like, okay, what are your non-alcoholic options? And surprisingly, over the years, the options are getting more interesting, and I'm sure, as you know, there's a lot of like non-alcoholic spirits out there. There's a lot of even de-alcoholized wine. There's so many options out there now. So I'm that person when I go to a bar, I'm like, okay, looking for the next interesting thing in their menu that's non-alcoholic. And this annoying thing I find, and this still happened to me like maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, where they've got 3 non-alcoholic drinks on the menu, and you ask for number 1, oh, sorry, it's not available, like it's on the menu. And then number 2, oh, sorry, we don't have, maybe they don't have the ingredients or something. So what do you have? So I'm then forced to have the one option that's available. And sometimes, you don't have, yeah. So I think for me, it started from that. And then obviously then going into making drinks myself, and then the whole mocktail bar, mobile bar thing. And from there, it just, I guess, evolved. And I thought, okay, all the stories that I consume from my sobriety groups, people need to hear about them. I feel like because everyone in that group is because they're interested. So maybe, if someone hears about it, it might inspire them to consider their drinking and think about, cutting down on the alcohol consumption. For health reasons, for sure. That's one. Yeah. And obviously for physical health, and I think for mental health. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's really inspiring.
Yeah. And I think one bit as well, actually, which I didn't mention earlier, is, again, this is very subjective for faith reasons as well, because I'm a Christian, but then Christianity is quite diverse in ways that, some people would say, oh, yeah, Christianity doesn't stop you from drinking. Jesus was at wine, all of that. But the way I grew up as a Christian, my own Christianity type was like, we don't drink in my church. And the church I went to with my mom. So it just became a thing. So yeah, it's never been. And I think, if anything, I'm just trying to use my platform, share more personal stories of people who've had experience with alcohol, and hopefully that can help other people. So that's been the whole.
I think it's amazing. I really do. And like, really admirable. And I think it's great because you give a different perspective on it. And I think that's really important. And I think because even for me, I often feel like, or do I have a place to talk about all of this? Because I feel like that sometimes, drinking. Yeah. But actually, it affects us all differently because our society that we're living in, like in the UK, that is so culturally accepted. It's the norm. Yeah. And actually, people don't look at other reasons as to why you might not be drinking. So yeah, I always say to people, like, whenever I go out and about, it's, oh, are you pregnant? Are you on antibiotics? Are you driving? Why are you not drinking? Like, because I'm not.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're going to be wrapping up now. And I think my last question to you would be, what advice would you have to your 18-year-old self?
Or
to that 18-year-old person out there who's like in uni, what advice would you give them?
I'm a big believer in developing our self-confidence. And however you do that, and like we've spoken a lot on being self-aware, and we've spoken a lot about, people's opinions of us and my experiences with being trolled and all of this. And I think one of my attributes as like my characteristics is self-confidence. And it's not arrogance, it's being confident and sure about me as a person. So I would advise anybody, and I'm going to give the same advice I give my daughter. If you can be confident in life, confident who you are, confident in your beliefs, confident to ask questions, confident to speak and articulate yourself, confident with how you look and how you present yourself, then life will be a lot easier. If you find that you're struggling with your confidence, I would say work on that, because it can be fixed. You can work on that. And I think as soon as you've got that confidence, anything is possible. And I know that sounds so cliche, doesn't it? But I'm so big on that with my little girl and her friends. Like, they're now at a point where she'll have her friends round and they'll be talking about the way they look or what this person has said and what that person said. And, my daughter come back recently and I'm not being biased, but she's stunning. She's genuinely beautiful. And she comes home and she said, oh, this person at school called me ugly today. And I went, right. I went, did you provoke it? Did you say anything horrible? She said, no, I didn't say anything. They just called me ugly. I went, do you believe them? And she went, no. I went, so is it a them problem or a you problem? She went, it's a them problem. And then I said, well, why do you think they've said it? And she went, oh, because they're jealous. I went, no, dig deeper. Let's go deeper than jealousy. Why are they jealous? And she said, oh, because they're unhappy. They're insecure about something. And okay, so you're going to let that affect you. You're going to let somebody else's words affect your confidence. Because if you let people's words affect your confidence and how you deliver yourself and how you speak and what you believe in, then your life will become very difficult. So is their opinion any of your business? And she'll look at me, she'll shake her head. I go, good. Says, has it affected you? She went, no. I says, are you ugly? She went, no, mum, I'm beautiful. There you go.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I think that's, for me, if I could say to any young person, confidence is key. Confidence is everything. And if you can be confident and work on that confidence, we're not all going to be confident. I'm still working on confidence. So I have confidence issues when it comes to business. And I know I need to work on that. But if you can develop confidence and strategies to improve self-confidence and learn to love yourself, then everything in life just becomes so much more easier. So much more easier. So it's almost like the foundation block, in my opinion, and something that I've lived by.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And we'll call it a wrap.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And where can people find you?
So I
stalk you already, so that's fine. Just tell them.
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm Sarah_Drage. And I also have a blog and website, which is sarahdrage.com. And all of my information's on there.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing. And until next time. Bye, guys.